come up with a suggestion that and I totally agree that Te Kaha with everyone, that Te Kaha should be separate because, as you say, 30,000 people said we'd like this, and you can see it walking down the road, it's great. So if that 3%'s in there, if we go 9 to 12 with Te Kaha on top, if it ends up at 9 with Te Kaha on top, we've got 12. But if we end up at 12 and it's more, we'll put it in because it's only draft. We've just got to give these guys some direction on where we're going, otherwise we'll be here all day. All good? Yeah, move on. Sorry.
Last point.
Yeah,
Is it possible to include inflation as well as identified? Oh.
Okay, so you've got that. Move on to the next one, please.
Thank you very much, and appreciate the time to
Oh no, they're all good
that.
questions. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, they are. They certainly are. So I've touched on the operational savings that are being considered, and there'll be more detail on this in a following briefing. But this is the high level of summary of where they're looking, where there's efficiencies. So we're looking at savings of, approximately 12.7 million. Some of those means that we'll be getting less revenue. So that's why the revenues in brackets, giving a total of 11.4. So that's the same methodology as going through. There's additional revenue coming through, $7.4 million. And then we've broken, so these are initiatives that have come through from, sorry, I should have backtracked a bit. These are initiatives that have come through from staff looking at all budgets across the organisation. What can we do differently? What can we cut? What can we reshape? So this is what's come through with over 120 different initiatives have come through, and this is the high level summary of what that looks like. So in total, we're talking about just under $29 million. So I've spoken about the efficiencies. So we've rated them and categorised them in these spaces. So I've touched on what efficiencies looks like. We've identified some possibilities for additional revenue, and then we've broken them into a low impact and a high impact. So this is on servicing that council could provide to the community. If we did this, what's the impact on the community? Is it high or low? So those are the numbers sitting in there. And then the last line in the chart is concept. So something that we could consider. It probably wouldn't be happening in year one, but is that something we consider to go through? So like I say, more details will be coming through on this, but this is the where we're currently looking at. And as the comment says down the bottom, they're not all permanent, so that's so there would be the seesaw effect where it comes off but then have to bump up. But if it's permanent, then that's a saving going forward or additional revenue going forward, whatever that space looks like. But like I say, more detail will be coming on those. Rating for renewals. There's been some discussion on this already, so we thought it would be good to bring to the council today, just to step through this and ensure that we're all on the same page and understanding the challenges that we have in this space. So where are we at? Currently, the strategy is to move to funding 100% of renewals from rates and NZTA subsidy. So what that's saying is we get some money from NZTA, which will pay for rates in the transport space. So therefore, we'll pay for renewals in the transport space. So combining rates and NZTA, we wanted to be at 100% by 2031. That's the current financial strategy. At the moment, we're at 75%. So why are we looking at this? Because council doesn't fund depreciation. So what I mean by that is when depreciation is the normal wear and tear of a asset that any organisation has. So it's deemed to be the annual, use of the asset. Council doesn't fund that. Effectively, we fund the capital borrowings, and so we're using renewals as a proxy, if you like, for depreciation. So that's one thing that the audit will look at is, okay, well, you have your depreciation and your renewals. Are your renewals matching your depreciation? If not, why not? And often there's reasons why we wouldn't necessarily spend all your depreciation on renewals. There might be an asset that you're not going to replace after a time. So this was introduced in 2015 long-term plan. This calculation, it affects borrowing levels, it affects our debt ratios, our balanced budget, our rates, and our intergenerational equity. So the key matrix and the ongoing impact on future generations. And the numbers I've already spoken about, there's been a reduction of 1.9% for 2025. There's no, looking at what we've done, we believe that there's no further room to reduce renewals or debt repayment without impacting on council's balanced budget and prudence benchmark. That's a benchmark set by the Department of Department of Internal Affairs. It's a benchmark that there's a number of them that DIA put out. All councils need to report on that. It's not solid. It's probably what we'd call a sticky benchmark, but it's a good indication as to are we being financially prudent. So we would like to make sure that we do have a balanced budget. You might pop in and out from one year to the other for a particular reason, but anyway. So where are we looking at? So the top line there, the grey line, that's depreciation going through to 2034. The orange is the planned expenditure on renewals, and that bounces around a wee bit. There is a bit of a gap, but that you see that heading up higher in 26, 27, and then the blue lines, I guess the harder blue line is, or the solid blue line is the better one to look at. That's the level of rates and NZTA subsidy going through. So you can see the latter years, it pretty much balances renewals. It's increasing over the years of the LTP. So we look at a 20-year average. You know, we don't look at a year in isolation because things do bounce around. Can bounce around quite a bit. So, but looking at the 20 years, that's the average. That's our planned approach. And so we'll continue to do that. We're still waiting on some of the data to come through from the capital program, just on detailing that level of renewals out over 20 years. We were discussing this, and like internally, we'd had the discussion at council a couple of times, or briefings a couple of times, and just the other day we were discussing it again. You know, what's the best approach, and can we? And then we got this excerpt from, Local Government New Zealand sent out a bit of a briefing. It sounds like other councils are also considering this. And so what it says that it pointed to the Local Government Act, stating that a council must ensure that each year's projected operating revenues are set at a level sufficient to meet that year's projected operating expenses. So it was just raising, the concern that if councils are looking to not fund depreciation, now understand that we don't, we use renewals in that space, so we could substitute renewals to keep rates down. It would not meet that criteria, and it would be invalid. There are reasons why you could be below, like I said, but just stopping it would not be one of those. So the intent is that we service the community over the longer term, the best result, understanding, meeting the needs of the current shareholders, current ratepayers, and future ratepayers. Okay. So where are we looking? Based on the 13.3% rates increase, so that's what we've put in here. So the red line going across is at 100%. So that's that's a balanced budget benchmark. So this is the first year of the LTP. Saying so the blue line, that's the current where we are. So the draft 23-24 annual plan is the red line. Is the black graph. So you can see that there's we are just touching on for 25 for the first year.
The black should be current position.
Sorry?
The black is current position.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, we just need to rename the graph. Let's have a look. The black line is the black graph, the black columns. That's where we currently are. So in the latter years, we balance. There's a bit of a gap, a healthy gap. Year 1, 2025, we are right on. So we're in breach of, well, no, not in breach. We are right on. We are in risk of breaching that space. So what that's saying is that we cannot reduce the level of rates for renewals in that year any further. Will be below. We will not have a balanced budget. So what that means is, if we don't rate for renewals, our rates are lower. So therefore, we won't have enough rates to offset our operational expenditure. So we will have an imbalanced position, and that would not be something that we would be suggesting. Okay. We'd like to think that there would be some scope in there to be able to do that, and we have done that in the past. We did that for the current year. We reshaped where that would be, and so that's one of the reasons that we're in this position now. We've taken that a couple of times. Anything further you want to say there?
No, that's fine.
Cool. So, looking at that and what I've said, our recommendation is the status quo where we currently are. Stay on the strategy. Don't move that level at all because of the risk that I've just outlined. Yeah. That last bullet point in this slide, but saying that we stay where we are, we avoid the CapEx-related costs consuming a larger share of rates than currently do. So the next slide sort of, I guess, outlines where we're sitting there. We talk about CapEx being relatively inexpensive. In fact, it probably takes about, I think it's $92 million of CapEx spend equals about a 1% rate increase over 2 years. So the reason I say over 2 years, we anticipate a lower spend in year 1 and a fuller year spend in year 2. So that's the combined effect of that. So when looking at the rates, just splitting the rates between operational costs and CapEx costs, so that's debt repayment, interest and the likes, we're just on half of the rates that we take are being spent in CapEx. So whilst an individual project may not have a huge impact, cumulatively over the term, it does have quite a significant impact on the rates, because we repay our debt over a 30-year term, taking on average, looking at all the assets we have and the life of the asset. To get the, I guess, focus on the intergenerational equity, so the people who are using the assets pay for it. That's the understanding. So, or the rationale. So, using a 30-year repayment plan best meets that. And doing that, we do build up a level of capital. So that's what that's showing here. The significant impact that CapEx does have on rates. So we did look at a number of options, alternatives. So defer the increase for 2 years and extend the time frame. We looked at that, and I'll come to the table which sets out this. So what that will mean, there'll be additional borrowing, which will cause an extra 2.7% rates increase over the term of the LTP, and also negatively impact our debt headroom. If we deferred the increase for 2 years and then accelerated that gap over the remainder of the current LTP over 2031, what does that do? Well, the balanced budget benchmark is unbalanced for 3 years. Borrowing is not as much as the previous year, but it is still a jump, and it's an extra 1.1% rates increase over the term of the LTP. Yeah. And so also over the annual rates increase over 27-31 period for renewals is be approaching 3%. So that's a significant amount in itself. So the next table sort of summarises each of those. So the red line, the blue and the black tabs, that's what we've had. So just looking at the green and the orange, so the green is is pausing it for 2 years and then accelerating it over the 2031. So you can see that we remain unbudgeted for 1, 2, 3 years, just get above in 2028, and then we're above beyond that. If we have a 2-year extension and then so pause it for 2 years and then have a 2-year extension, so add on 2 years to the 2031 targeted time, you'll see that we're unbudgeted for a significant portion of the LTP. So for these reasons, it's not our recommendation that this be looked at. Look, there's quite a bit of, we tried not to get too technical in this space. We tried to paint the picture as clear as we could. I'm happy to stop here and ask any questions to make sure that we're understood. Following this, we'll be going on to the rating section. So Andrew Jeffries will be joining us at the table. But happy to take any questions on this, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Russell. I'll just I'll just write that down. So in front of us, guys, we've got 3 things: status quo, option 1, or option 2. So that's what these guys want guidance on. So that's what we need to do. We've got to think whether we want to borrow some more dough if we go for option 1, or borrow slightly less money at option 2, or stick with the status quo, which they are recommending. So fire away with your questions. Victoria's first.
My question's been answered in the latest slides. Thank you.
Jake?
Thanks. Takes a while to get your head around this one. Initially, I was thinking, how can you have unbalanced, and thinking about it from a household budget perspective when we pick them, we choose how much revenue comes in. But I see now that it's really around that borrowing now to subsidise rates. My question is, how do we have a balanced budget at the moment if not 100% of our renewals are paid for out of rates?
That's a great question. The balanced budget calculation has a mix of things in it. It includes depreciation, like I say, but we don't fund depreciation, we fund renewal. So we use that. Within the balanced budget revenues, we can also use revenues from NZTA that are used for capital purposes as well. So that pops that up a bit. So there's a mix of things in there.
So it accounts for that intergenerational equity of the idea that for renewals you should do some rating and some borrowing.
Our recommendation is that we would move to be fully rating for renewals and getting to that space over time.
So if that's balanced, how are we balanced where we are at the moment? Both can't be.
There are some Crown capital revenues that are allowed to be incorporated in the calculation, and the significant Crown contribution for Te Kaha over the last couple of years has, I guess, hidden, for want of a better word, the fact that we have an unbalanced budget.
Very hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry, I heard it. Yeah, fair enough.
I'd ask you to say it again, please.
Yeah, there are some Crown capital revenues that are allowed to be incorporated in the calculation. It's only Crown capital revenues, and there's been significant Crown capital revenues over the last couple of years and the current year for Te Kaha. So that has helped significantly that ratio, that balanced budget ratio. Without those Crown revenues, we probably would have had an unbalanced budget for the last 2 or 3 years.
I should point out, this is a ratio that's set on to us by DIA. We have our own treasury matrix to make sure that we are, fully financially prudent, and we're meeting the treasury needs. Also, this isn't the cash position, this is the accounting position. Like I said, it's got depreciation in there. So although this matrix would say that we haven't got a balanced budget. From a cash position, we do. We wouldn't be running cash short. Yeah.
Okay, Melanie, please.
With those, say for number one, it says the net extra 2.7% rates increase over the LTP. So that's over 10 years. And is that purely the interest cost that we're talking about that causes that increase?
Yeah, that's just interest cost, isn't it, over the...
Would be interest and starting to repay that extra 267 million that you would borrow over that time.
Did you hear that? That's...
If we were to be rating for renewals now, where we would be essentially paying that up front. So I would have thought that doesn't quite make sense to me. Because I would have thought the only difference between rating for it now or borrowing and then rating for it later is the interest cost. Or not.
Okay, so that's a great question. So mostly it's interest, but understanding that when we do borrow, we do start to repay that when we borrow it as well. So there's an element of debt repayment in that 2.7%. The significant part, though, is interest. Yep.
So we're more or less taking out a housing loan for 267 million for 10 years, and that's what the repayments will cost us. Principal and interest.
Yeah, the borrowing doesn't all happen in the first year.
No, of course it won't. Yeah. Okay. Righto. Thank you, Yanni. Sarah, please.
Just a quick question. Rather than just going straight for one of those, what would it take just to give us a little bit of leeway in 2025 so that we weren't risking the balanced budget? Is there a tweak we can make on that one to make sure that we're actually staying balanced and not risking it?
We have done that already on the slide there. We've already reduced it 1.9 for 25, which has reduced that 13.3 by 0.25%. So
Yeah.
it's
On the slide it was saying it was just right on. And
it's
sort of-
right on. There is a risk we will have an unbalanced budget for 25
Yeah.
with the other changes and options that we need to look at.
So my question was then, how do we mitigate that risk? Like, is there a way to make a small tweak, maybe with a tiny little bit of additional revenue to make sure, and you may not be able to answer it right now, but it would be really good to see what that would look like,
Yes.
so we weren't risking that in just 2 years' time ahead of the next LTP. That's all.
We can look at that. We sort of need to know what the answer is before we can do that. So we need to see where the proposals and the savings options where we land
Yeah.
and what the ratio looks like, and then it could be possible to tweak it.
So we just need to make that explicit when we have the discussion in February. Yeah. Thanks.
Pauline, you coming, yeah?
Mine was along the same lines, but looking at these two options, originally I was looking at the 2-year extended time frame, but looking at the graph, I think it seems more prudent to support the 2 years with the accelerated increase, because that actually reduces the length of time of an unbalanced budget. And just looking at so I would actually support the option 2, but the word you use, unbalanced budget, sounds really scary, but I believe it's not actually scary, so long as we don't do that too frequently or for too long, and provided we have a very good reason to do that. Like, it's not a crime, is it? Balanced budget is like a policy or an ideal, but if we have good cause to have an unbalanced budget for, say, 1 or 2 years, it's not a big black mark, is it?
For 1 year, I don't believe audit would qualify the LTP. Understand that audit have to audit the LTP. So this is a prudence benchmark set out by Department of Internal Affairs. And so it's to ensure that councils are prudently managing their funds and rating accordingly and covering the things that they should cover. So you're right in that it's not a firm matrix that we must attain, but so there are reasons for not attaining it, But if we're going to do that for any length of time, and like we're talking a few years there, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 years into 2028, that would seem like in our view, a risky position to be taking through to audit and having the DIA review as well. So that wouldn't be what we'd be recommending. As Bruce has already outlined, there is risk as we currently sitting in the current year of meeting where we are, based on the numbers that we're got in front of us.
Okay, so I would support what Sarah's suggesting, that perhaps if you can bring back some sort of a number that's going to work, so that we have a little bit of a financial buffer there to get us through that. It's that hump we're trying to navigate. So if we can find some sort of a number that would work there, so that we don't have an unbalanced budget for too long, I think that would be good.
Okay, so we'll definitely be looking at this post, once we've, I guess, landed on the other options that we'll be considering.
Yanni, please.
Yeah, do we have a sense of how, like, what the additional cost will be to reactive maintenance if we defer these renewals?
Yeah, it's not the renewals themselves.
Well, we're not rating for it, so we're not doing it, right?
No,
We're just borrowing.
yeah, to be clear, we're still doing the renewals work. It's how we're funding it. We either rate fund them or re-borrow it. Currently, we're doing a mix of both.
Right, okay. So where we're deferring, like renewing streets and the LTP, what does that mean in terms of like the cost?
Okay. You finished? Yeah?
Well, no, sorry, I just want to be clear. Like, so regardless of whether we do more or less,
You're mixing.
yeah, well, I just want to understand this then. So regardless of how we pay for it, the proposal is still to do less in terms of renewals than the LTP.
No, we're not. We're just talking about how we fund the renewals
I've answered the
expenditure.
question. Thank you, Russell. Tyler.
Sorry, yeah.
Good guys, forgive me. It's sort of going whoosh over my head a little bit in terms of the rating and borrowing parts of this and the pros and cons. It's quite a high level piece here. So I just wanted to get some clarification around some of the stuff that I've written down. And the first one, in terms of the pros, I want some clarity on this. There's a reduced reliance on borrowing, which could decrease the council's dependence on external funding, potentially, and leading to lower interest payments. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is
If we
correct.
take the staff rate.
Yeah. So we stay on track. The recommendation from staff is that we stay on track and move the funding of renewals from debt to rates.
Okay.
So over time, the debt and interest components will come back.
Yeah. Okay. And your debt management will look a bit better in terms of achieving a higher funding percentage from rates and subsidies. The next one is the balanced budget, and I wasn't quite sure on that. I'm not really clear exactly. I see the red line here, and I'm not sure what everyone's talking about the 2025 year. Can I, in layman's terms, can you just clarify for me?
Okay. So the red line is 100%. Okay. So we just put a red line in because it's easier to see over the 4 years. So that's a balanced budget, if you like. We above the red line, we're balanced. Below, we're not. Looking at year 25 and understand that the black is where we currently are sitting, we are going to be under.
Okay.
Or just on, like risk of being under, we're just on. In the latter years, it's above, although you see 27 is close. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the next question is around intergenerational equity.
Yep.
So by fully funding through rates renewals, the council could, or the intention is to distribute the funds equitably across all generations, which go across between 25 and 34. Is that correct?
So if you like, we use renewal expenditure as a proxy for depreciation. So depreciation is the wearing out or the use of the asset every year. So by doing this, then the people using the asset every year are paying for that cost in the rates, as opposed to borrowing for it and just paying 1/30th in 1 year. Yeah.
I see.
And that, so if we didn't embark on the strategy of moving it, and I haven't seen them, but I understand that when it was first brought in, our debt was just going extremely high, and it would be unaffordable very, very quickly. So, and
It's great you're trying to bring the hub down. I see it in the
Thank you, Tyler.
page. But so there's an increased pressure on rates immediately if we follow through with the staff rec.
That's right. We're moving from the pressure is now as we put more into rates to fund renewals. So I think it's about 2.1%. Yeah, 2.1% increase year on year.
And can you talk to me about the agility of that? So, for example, does that mean that you're not financially flexible if you do go with this? Say something happens and the debt headroom changes. Does that mean if a flood happens, for example, we have to put quite a big amount into capex? Would that mean it'll be harder to get that money?
If we didn't have the strategy, so. Perhaps,
sorry, just weighing up pros and cons.
Yeah.
I saw some head shaking in the back, so it sounds about right.
Thank you.
we can have a chat if you like.
Okay, cool.
Moving right along. If we go with your, I'm allergic to borrowing money. We've already got $2 billion on the hook. To go and borrow another $250 million and add on to it doesn't make sense to me. So your recommendation is the one that doesn't add $250 million onto our borrowing. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Our recommendation, or staff's recommendation, is we stay the status quo.
Absolutely.
Stay the strategy. Yep.
But if some councillors wanted to change it a little bit, they could throw an amendment in if they wanted to. But in general, we need a bit of guidance here. Are we generally happy with the status quo, which is recommended? Oh, yeah. I think generally that's what I'm hearing. But if other councillors want to change it and put in an amendment, they're more than welcome to.
Yeah, can they bring that information back this year?
Okay, but generally, that status quo is where we're working towards.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, cup of tea.
So is it at a time? Back
We-
at 11:10.
10 past 11, everybody. Thank you.